Richard R. Becker is an acclaimed American author celebrated for his best-selling literary fiction and psychological thrillers. With a wealth of experience spanning journalism, advertising and academia, Richard's multifaceted career is a testament to his dedication to storytelling and his dynamic engagement in diverse fields. And he's on the line with us here to talk about his debut novel, The Third Wheel. How are you today?
Hey, great, Toby. Thanks for having me on.
So, this debut novel is, of course, called Third Wheel. So, can you just give us a brief overview about what the book is all about and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. Well, Third Wheel takes place in Las Vegas in 1982. It's a story about a 14-year-old boy named Brady Wilks, and he's a transplant from the Midwest. So he grew up in Cleveland, and he sort of navigates life in Las Vegas when really it was still kind of a mob town. In fact, the book takes place in the summer of 1982, and it might be interesting to note that Lefty Rosenthal's car exploded in the fall of 1982. So the book happens just before that. It's really a story about Brady trying to fit in with a group of kids. He has a best friend who lives next door. They hang out together. They do a lot of things together. They had another friend that hung out with them, but he left. And then when he leaves, Brady's friend Mick invites another kid named Alex to join them. And Alex he's actually a drug dealer. So he starts steering the group away from, fun times, like just, maybe stealing a little bit of alcohol from the liquor cabinet and maybe playing Dungeons and Dragons or regular childhood games, and tries to move them into doing a cartel-supplied drug deal of a lifetime where they could all make a lot of money. And that's kind of like the impetus of the story. And at the same time, there's, a lot of subplots go through it. That's kind of where the story is. So in terms of the inspiration for it, the book sort of kind of chose me. So my first book was called 50 States, and it was a collection of short stories. And I wrote one story for each state in the United States. And then I followed that up with another book called 10 Threads, and it was just 10 stories. But one of those stories in 10 Threads was called Third Wheel. And once I wrote that story, I knew immediately that I had to continue on and make this story, that story, the first chapter of this book, and then kind of like go through it. It just sort of, reached to me and kind of touched me in a way that none of the other stories were.
How did the whole 50 states idea actually work? Did you have to write quite a lot of stories?
Oh, yeah. So the 50 States book, there were actually 50 short stories, and one takes place in each of the United States states.
Yeah.
So, and the way that came about was, I've been doing commercial writing and advertising, marketing, things like that for over 30 years. And I at the same time, I wanted to really start working on literary fiction. And being such a deadline-oriented person, the only way I could really tell myself to do it was to create deadlines. So what I did is I started writing. It was just 50 States started as a project, and my goal was to write one story a week for 50 weeks. And then I would share those stories on Facebook as I produced them. So it kind of created this deadline for me. And so I just kept going, and people started liking it, and people started following my page. And then after a while, the 50 states idea where one story would be in each state kind of came out of that. And I decided to publish it as a book. And that's how that started.
And this book, Third Wheel, is of course set in Nevada, Las Vegas, and it has themes of belonging and betrayal. And I understand those themes and the experiences of the protagonist, Brady Wilks, actually resonate with you.
All my stories, no matter what story I'm writing, I tend to draw like little bits of life experience. But Brady Wilks is kind of even closer to me in the sense that, we're different people because this is a work of fiction. But at the same time, if you were to take my framework of where I started and the framework of Brady where he starts in terms of the book, it's very similar. So like Brady, I also moved to Las Vegas in the late, there's a time difference, but in the late 70s, early 80s, I actually was born in Milwaukee. I was raised by grandparents, just like Brady was. And then my grandmother, she was suffering from cancer the whole time she was raising me. And so when everybody was certain she was going to die, there was a big conversation of what are we going to do about Rich? Where is Rich going to live, and who's he going to go with? So ultimately, the larger group of the family decided that I should be reunited with my mother, and I moved first to Minnesota, and then the family moved to Las Vegas. So it was my mother, my half sister, and the person that he didn't adopt me, but he became. In fact, I dedicated the book to him. He became my stepfather. So all those things with Brady, I really connect with. And when I came out here, being from Milwaukee in the Midwest, you come to Las Vegas, and it's a very different environment. And I think, like all kids, when they move someplace, they tend the first stop a lot of times is they hang out with a couple of kids that some people might consider nerds or socially unacceptable, but they're very welcoming because they're always looking for friends. And then you kind of drift to a different crowd if you're better suited for that kind of crowd. And in my case, and in the same with Brady's case, we kind of gravitated toward you get tired of being picked on when you're with these kids who aren't as socially acceptable. So in my case, in his case, we both drifted to a tougher crowd.
Why do you think some kids maybe struggle with moving around?
Yeah, I think what in terms of in my case, I think part of it was my mother had me when she was 17, so they were very young parents, right? And this is what I wanted to portray in the story a little bit was so you have these young parents. There's only a 17-year age difference, which as you get older, of course, that almost evaporates, right?
Yeah.
So they didn't know how to raise a kid who was the age I was, and as a result, and plus their own lifestyle, moving to Las Vegas, there's a lot of excitement. They were definitely part of the Las Vegas scene. They like to go to parties and do things like that. And that kind of creates a sort of a lack of structure in a child's life. And if children don't have structure, and I believe that all children crave structure, if they don't have structure, they tend to look for it other places. And in some cases, in some cities, it might be being picked up by gangs, or it might be picked up with a certain party kind of element, or it could be falling into groups with drugs. And part of it is you get that social acceptance is very easy. Social acceptance, like if you want to be accepted, it's a really low bar for some of these groups because all you have to do is pass around a beer bottle or a bottle of whiskey and take a swig and, oh, you're one of us now. And that's a low bar. Where some of the other groups, which we look at as more some of the more popular groups or they're viewed as more popular, generally those are all tied to like skill sets, right? So if you play football, you might hang out with football players or for Utopia, it might be rugby, right?
Maybe.
Yeah. So you kind of gravitate to the people, to those kind of social structures. But when you don't have any of that, when you come into a new town and you can't find that niche, then your only out courses is you either fall in with the kids who are a little bit picked on unfairly, or you fall in with the kids that are a little bit tougher and rougher around the edges.
And drug involvement is something that you portray within the book. Yeah. So how do you navigate addressing those themes authentically while maintaining the focus on the character's personal growth?
Great. That's a really good question. So actually, one of the reviewers had pointed out when they were doing the review of the book is that they felt like some of the drug scenes, I didn't like turn them into glorifying drugs in any way, but I treated it more like almost documentary to kind of keep it on the sidelines because the drugs are there and that's part of the plot line for some characters. It's not Brady's plot line. So Brady's plot line is very clearly that he wants to belong. The challenge he has as a kid is that, in fact, he's kind of unique to most characters, is that Brady never gets he can never seem to get what he wants. He can only get the things he doesn't want. So the offers that he gets are not the offers that he really wants. And he just wants to belong and he wants to be loved. He doesn't have that home. He doesn't really even have it with this group of kids. So that's really the bigger arc. And the drug deal, when you think about it, like if we separated Alex, the drug dealer, out, the drug deal is really his plot line. It's his intention. It's his desire. And then everybody else gets kind of sucked into that. But Brady actually has a separate one where it's really about that belonging and betrayal.
It is a coming-of-age book, of course, but I take it it's not all dark. There are some light parts in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so one of the biggest subplots in the book is that Brady, even though he's 14, he does at a party meet a girl who's 18. And there is sort of it's kind of a taboo love relationship that they develop. And she's not really certain about it. On the front end, she doesn't know his age because even though he's only 14, he's taller and he's hanging out with kids who are 16 and 18 years old. So she assumes, he's just one of them. But later, because of some of the things he does and some of the decisions he makes, she can it kind of comes out that he's a lot younger. And that creates a lot of friction in the story, but there's a lot of lighter parts. Like one of my favorites to write, in terms of the lighter parts, was Brady goes over to her house after they had met, and he goes over to her house just to wash their car. And there's that moment when you have two kids in the 1980s out in the Las Vegas summer, just washing and waxing a car and hosing it off. And that's something you don't see as much, anymore today, especially in Las Vegas, because we have droughts. So you're supposed to use special car washes and whatnot. But it was a real innocent moment. So they play around and they get into a water fight and they, roll around on the ground. And it's just that one of those tender scenes where you say, wow, these two, even though there's this lie that's in the middle of them, they could really hit it off otherwise.
That's quite an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Now, the early reviews for the book are looking great. You've got lots of 5-star ones. So how does it feel to have so many positive reviews out there?
Yeah, it's actually really exciting because you never know as a author what's going to happen. In fact, this is kind of a funny story. So one of the first ones, and this will kind of roll into it really well. I was actually traveling with my daughter. She's a travel softball player, and so we were in California at tournaments. And after one of the tournament games, we went to Balboa Beach, and we're sitting on this beach, just having lunch, and all of a sudden I get the notification on my phone, and it was really hard to open, that I got one of my very first reviews, which was from Kirkus Reviews, and that's a pretty prominent reviewer. That's one you want, a positive review. And so I was really struggling to get it open, and at the same time this dead seagull washes up on the shore. And I'm like, oh, that's not really a good taboo right there, right? That's not what you want to see when you're trying to look at your review. So I was kind of really nervous, and then it came up, and it was actually a great review. They had said it was a dark and skillful teenage crime novel with plenty of heart, and it wasn't the first one, but that one was really important. And then some of the other ones, it just feels really good. I don't need affirmation as an author, but at the same time, I'd be lying to say when people say things like your book is brilliant and mind blowing, a debut novel, it does make you feel good. And 50 States was reviewed really well and got a lot of 5-star reviews and some 4-star reviews, but so far the early reviews on this book have been way over and above anything that I could have expected.
Yes. Well, if there was one message, thought or feeling or whatever that you'd want people to be left with once they've read Third Wheel, what do you think it would be?
Probably the most important message, and some people might not understand it right away. Now keep in mind, this is a novel, so it's fiction. I want people to be entertained. But if there is a takeaway, I think it's that it's never too late until it's too late. And what I mean by that is it's not too late to make a change in your life if you're kind of going in the wrong direction. There comes a point when, yes, it is too late to change your life because, there's a couple characters who have some catastrophic moments and you can't recover from those. But in Brady's case, there comes a point where you feel like he's way too far down and he's going to have to make a choice of whether or not he can become maybe a better person and make better decisions. And that's the transformation of this character. Whether he does or not, you'll have to find out by reading the book. But I think that's the message to come out of it is it doesn't matter how bad things are in your life right now, you can go ahead and turn them around. And that was actually a lesson that I learned in my own life because I had a pretty rough start. And then I went on to become someone who most people would identify as successful. I'm just happy to be a person, but I have a lot of accolades that I've picked up along the ways and feel pretty good about, how I turn things around.
Yeah. Well, do you have any upcoming projects that you're excited to work on in terms of books?
Yeah, I've got two things actually going on right now. One of which is Third Wheel is going to become an audiobook. It is going to become an audiobook. It's going to be narrated by a four-time Emmy award-winning voice actor who actually also narrated 50 States. So I'm really excited about that. And we've been working on that. I've been listening to the tracks and they sound really good. He is very talented, very versatile voice. And then at the same time, although right now kind of doing interviews and whatnot, talking about third wheel has been the biggest thing I've been working on. I am starting my next novel. It's not going to be, I'm going to take a break from Brady. His story's not 100% done, but I'm going to take a break from Brady Wilks and I'm going to continue to write a psychological thriller. I've been working on it. It takes place in Maine, and it's got some different characters in it. And actually, if people wanted to see a preview of that, if they read the main chapter in 50 States, that they would actually see the very beginnings of that novel right there on the page. And actually, I continued it in 10 threads too. So there's almost two chapters done. But I already have a plot outline. I know exactly where it's going. And I think it's going to really surprise people. It's a little bit different kind of cut from a coming of age novel. But I think it'll surprise people because this is one of those books that'll definitely have some twists and turns. And at the same time, it's still kind of couched in literary fiction. So I can work on like bigger plots. So a lot of times literary fiction is a little, not, I don't want to say highbrow, but it's a little, there's something else in it to give it a lift beyond just psychological thriller. So it's not just a thriller. It'll also talk about how we perceive different people at different stages in their life. Like, let's say, when we were all in high school growing up, we have certain perceptions of how people are, and then we meet them 10 years later, and those perceptions may or may not still be valid.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, where are we able to find this debut novel, Third Wheel?
Well, Third Wheel you can find anywhere books are sold. Probably the biggest place people pick up Third Wheel is going to be on Amazon. So if you typed in Third Wheel and Becker, it'll pop up very easily. You can find it by doing a search on me, Richard R. Becker, with Third Wheel on Google, and lots of things should come up. In fact, I know they will. And then, of course, you can also visit. I do have a blog. It was originally my communication marketing blog, but I'm starting to write more about fiction there, and that's richardrbecker.com.
Excellent. Well, many thanks for talking to us today. It's been great having you here.
Great. Thanks so much, Toby. I really appreciate it.